Welcome to the First Customers Podcast. I'm your host, Paris Vega. Today we have Mark Stouse with us. He's a former corporate CMO turned software CEO. His startup went from $0 to $2 million in revenue in only 18 months. Now they're one of the 100 top partners for Salesforce, and they're still growing. Their client roster includes mega brands like Bayer, Samsung, Johnson Controls, Oracle, and others. Mark, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Let's get right to it. How'd you get your very first customers?
I think, the way I saw it at the time and the way that I see it today, and with the benefit of lots of hindsight and lots of learning, is somewhat different, right? I think that the biggest challenge that startups have is that they are startups. The marketplace doesn't know much about them. They don't really have any sense of confidence, the confidence level that they should have or not have. They don't know whether they're good people or not. So the trust scores are kind of like up in the air, right? And these are all things, these three psychographics around awareness, confidence, and trust are key to the way that people make buy decisions, particularly when there's a lot on the line. And so a startup that doesn't have a lot of brand reputation, because that's really what those three things amount to in the end, right? Needs to be able to pull brand reputation from something else or someone else. That's where my personal experience looking back on it is that in the beginning, the importance of founders having strong personal brands in the area that their company is seeking to operate in is key. I mean, it is absolutely key. If no one knows your company and no one knows you either, right? Your success likelihood is very low single digits, right? And particularly if you are proposing to solve a really big problem, a big hairy problem,
right?
They're going to say, well, how do I know I can trust you? How do I know I can have confidence that you know what you're talking about and that your solution does what it says it can do? And so immediately, just right out of the gate, right, you have all kinds of reasons going through their mind why they won't do business with you. Because you got to really understand that particularly in B2B, there's no one more risk averse than a reasonably senior leader who's being asked to make a buy decision. Because if they do it wrong, it can really hurt them. And so it's one of the reasons why you see deal velocity, right, particularly in the last year or so, really lengthening out, is that people not only are under financial pressure, but they're extremely pressurized around opportunity cost. And opportunity cost is the whole idea that if you spent the money wrong, then not only did you lose that money that you invested, but you also lost what you could have invested in it. So you're kind of a two-time loser minimum. And that people would rather just die almost than have that happen right now, because people's jobs, they're more vulnerable right now than they've been in quite a while, things like that.
Right.
So this is the big deal, right? When it comes to that, kind of cold start, that, going from 0 to 1, right, that's the hardest part of all, right? Sometimes people can kind of sandbag this a little bit by getting some early paying customers, almost like that they announce with, right? They announce the formation of their company, right, and we already have these 5 customers. But if you'll notice, most of the time, no revenue numbers are attached to those 5 customers. And that's because the amount of money that's being paid is so trivial that it's just not even worth talking about, right?
Or
5
maybe even a
grand,
free
10 grand,
trial.
something like that, right? And so, it's just not even worth talking about. And so it's a little bit of a ruse. And I don't think that it necessarily really helps, because I think everybody today sees through it. But I think, in my particular case and my co-founder's case, Kyle and I had a long established, well-known track record as marketing leaders who had successfully, based on the testimony of the CEOs we were working for, we had solved this problem. And very few other people could make that claim. And we got a lot of press around it over a number of years. Actually, the whole reason why I got recruited to Honeywell to be the CMO of Honeywell Aerospace was the press that I got, right, around the job that I had right before that. And the CEO, the then CEO of Honeywell, basically said, "Hey, you know what? I want to talk to this guy."
Right.
So it's the same deal, whether you're going for a job or whether you're trying to sell a product in, right? At the end of the day, people want to know, are a lot of people aware of you, right? Because that kind of carries some weight all by itself. Do I have confidence in what you're saying to me? And do I think you're a good person that's going to do right by me, the company, whatever, right? So the trust piece is sort of the ethical piece, and the confidence piece is essentially a reflection on, can you deliver what you say you can deliver?
So you're saying that the founder's personal brand is critical to getting those first legitimate customers, or at least
Yeah.
it was a big part of how you got your customers and moved up through your career.
Yeah.
So,
And then
most people probably aren't in the news very often. That seems like a
right.
rare thing. Is there anything you can maybe give some advice or speak to how a founder can build their personal brand, since you're saying that's like a critical part of getting those first customers?
Well, you have to start long before you actually need it.
Okay.
Right. So it's like planting a forest, in order to chop it all down for wood later,
Yeah.
you're going to probably have to start planting that one 20 years before you need the lumber. Right.
Yeah.
So in my particular case, right, I mean, a lot of the brand building that happened, when it was happening, if I had any intent around it at all, it was more around, hey, enjoy the notoriety, right? I wouldn't necessarily call it fame, but certainly the notoriety, and it's going to help me get my next job, my next gig, right? Because it wasn't until pretty late in the game, in some ways, that we decided to do this, meaning the startup, right? So we're also very different as a startup. I mean, most of the people that are in Proof today are certainly older than 45. Some
Okay.
of them are older than 55. Um, and I think that it gives us a lot of stability and strength. And when we show up in meetings, people go, "Oh, okay, these are not people that haven't been around the block very much, that may not know really what's really going on."
Right.
So I mean, there's just I think that the most important thing I can really say about this is that instead of talking about it as some sort of brand, which most people kind of mostly associate with awareness,
Mm-hmm.
what you're really building over time, and it is very much something that builds over time, is people's confidence and trust in you and what you've done and what you say. And if you there were people that I talked to about Proof in the early days that said, man, you know what? I don't know anything about what you're saying, but the fact that you're saying it, I have loads of belief in that. And so I will either, buy your product and you tell me what I need to do to implement it and all that kind of stuff, or I will, in some cases, invest in your company. And you don't really I'd never liked the idea that people were investing because of me, because I'm just a human being like everybody else. Right.
Right.
So I would always really, reinforce the opportunity, and our investment decks, or for that matter, our sales decks, were always first class. Right. And I really wanted them, but it's unavoidable, right? They're going to look at me and Kyle and the other people in Proof, and they're going to go, okay, I hear everything. I see everything. What do I feel in my heart about these guys? And that's ultimately going to drive their decision.
Interesting. Okay, so it sounds like, since you mentioned the founder brand being such a big part of your success, when you decided to finally start a startup, so that implies that networking, like referrals and that kind of relationship
Mm-hmm.
side of marketing that's based on trust and everything, would be a big part of it. Can you speak to any other like tactics or strategies or things that you guys did to actually execute starting the company? How did you reach out?
Yeah,
How did you
sure.
get the message
Yeah,
out?
no, I mean, so, there's several observations I would make.
Mm-hmm.
Even though, money's always tight in the startup, and
Yeah.
you want to kind of, your natural impulse as a founder is to spend it on the stuff that's highly visible to
Yeah.
the marketplace. And I totally get that. There are certain things that really will save your ass, right? When you need it to. And kind of like brand, personal or corporate brand, you have to start that process early and maintain it before it can really be of value to you. One of those is legal. So you want to get a great lawyer or a law firm on your side. You want the best contracts that you can possibly do, right? Whether they're your, commercial contracts or shareholder agreements or whatever. I mean, you want the people signing them. You want the, like procurement teams to go, wow, that's, I just want you to know that's a really great contract. Like, like it didn't have a lot of extra bullshit in it, right? It was very clear. It was, and everybody knows exactly what the rules of this game are. There's no obfuscation. There's no hidden outs. There's no weirdness, right? You don't want any of that. But when you all of a sudden you are faced with a situation that none of us want to be faced with, but if you're in business long enough, it will absolutely happen to you, right? You're going to be so thankful. You pull out that agreement, from DocuSign or whatever, and you're reading it, having just received some sort of, email or whatever. And you read it through again, refamiliarize yourself with the agreement, and you just relax. You just feel all the kind of, your blood pressure and everything else just starts to fall, right? Because you realize you don't have a problem.
Right.
And so it is, that's just a great thing. That's what, so I would also just say that you need to spend your money with the understanding on anything, with the understanding that it's whatever you think the payback period is on that money, where you're going to see value from it, it's going to be longer than that. Oftentimes considerably longer. And and you just got to be prepared for that, right? I mean, one of the number one reason why startups fail, right, is that they run out of money.
Yeah. Did you personally reach out to your network when you were launching Proof Analytics, or did you guys rely on advertising or marketing? Or
no, we actually we do advertise today, but
okay,
we started out totally organic. So LinkedIn has always been super strong for us as a channel. I'm very active myself there, and so we kicked it off on LinkedIn. And then we did some press, some industry trade press and things like that.
okay,
Did some press releases, and one of our board members knew somebody, at NASDAQ. And even though we weren't at NASDAQ, they have that big billboard there on Times Square, big vertical billboard. And they, for the princely sum of $100, right? We got our announcement up there on the big board, right? That was very cool, right? And it made, it doesn't really mean a whole lot, to be perfectly honest with you. What does mean more, not a whole lot more, but what does mean more is the photograph of you on the big board that then you can send out to your shareholders and all this kind of stuff. And it's kind of a feel good, right? So, but it doesn't make shareholders feel good or anyone else feel good in the same way that ramping sales makes everybody feel good.
Sure.
And so, that's the whole goal. And the other part that's so key here, because again, we're back to awareness, confidence, and trust, is that whoever your first customers are, their success with your product or with your service is it's impossible to exaggerate how important that is.
Yeah.
Customer success is always important. It's important today, right? No matter where you are in your growth cycle, it's going to be important. But in those early days, it's crucial, right? Because what's going to happen is that you're going to, in some way, shape, or form, you're going to announce the existence of these customers. Could just be their logos are on your website. It could be something more interesting than that on LinkedIn or, whatever. Okay. But you're going to want to announce them because that's momentum.
Yeah.
So then you have a stake in the ground with everybody else that you talk to, and they're going to say, so how's it going with so-and-so? Right. Or, tell me a story of how Johnson Controls got value from this, or, whatever. Right. And if you can't do that, and kind of like under pressure, so to speak, actually get your customer to tell them, then that's not a good thing.
Right.
And you're gonna have a problem maintaining your momentum, because everyone's gonna kind of go, ooh, silence is not golden on this deal.
Right.
Right. If customer X was really deriving tons of benefit, they would say something, right? It may not be detailed. They may look at all the details as being, competitive advantage and all that kind of stuff. And everyone gets that. But if they're not on the record somewhere publicly as saying, this company is just awesome, you ought to really talk to them. It's, made a big difference for us. That's a very generic set of 3 sentences. And yet, it's really important.
Do you have a process for collecting or incentivizing that kind of feedback so that you can use it publicly or in case studies?
Yeah. I mean, basically the way that I learned to do this, and it still works really well, but I learned it in big software companies, is that you present the the contract, the term sheet, right? And you say, here's your price. This assumes that you will allow us to publicly, share the fact that you're a customer and your success and all that kind of stuff. And obviously we have to get approvals from you. You're going to say whatever you want to say and all that kind of stuff. But, and if you don't want to do that, if your legal team or your procurement team, says, oh no, we don't do that, then your price is 10% more.
Mm.
And nobody wants to check that box accepting 10% more.
Wow. Do you ever see that being a deal breaker for potential
sometimes,
clients?
but not permanently, right?
Okay.
Because they're weighing, somebody ultimately says, this is stupid, right? They want a concession from us that's non-financial to us. And by denying it, we're going to have to pay them 10% more, right? This is just dumb, right? We had already made the decision that they were the best, that we should buy them and not the next guy, right?
Yeah.
So this is just dumb. And so, I've seen very few deals. They might get delayed while there's an internal argument between procurement and the internal customer or something like that. But procurement is not going to win that deal. They're just not. I've never seen them actually win it. Sometimes if legal picks up the cudgel, right, they can make it stick.
Picks up the what? What was that word?
The bat, the cudgel, the
okay.
club, right? Right. If they do that, then they have a way of making it stick. Okay. And then
Gotcha.
As the vendor, you have to decide, do I want to lose all that revenue or not? And, all this kind of stuff. Knowing also, the other thing is, that if it goes really, really well, that somebody on the client side is going to say something anyway.
Okay.
Right. So, it's kind of like, I think that you can encourage people in a variety of ways. The most effective way that I've seen outside of the contract provision is just appealing to people's ego, right? Where you're not making it about them talking about how great you are. You're whatever they say, they're talking about their own success. So they kind of like the best that I've ever seen like this, where like a CMO or a CRO or somebody like that will say, wow, we were able, and we is sort of code for me, right? That's sort of the way that everyone understands what's really being said. We were able to accomplish all these things, and they tell this big success story. And oh, by the way, the tool we used was Proof or whatever, right?
Gotcha.
And so that's all that's necessary, right? Is tying you explicitly to all of this value that was delivered, that they realized.
To their win.
That's the winner, man, right there.
Okay.
And people, that's part of them building their brand.
Right.
Right. So it's in their own interests to do it. And most of the time, procurement, legal, they're not looking at the news, or whatever, particularly in areas that maybe don't relate to their company. That's not happening. Right. So it tends to just happen, and it's all good. And no one gets in trouble, and it's all good.
So when you guys first announced Proof Analytics on LinkedIn, like you probably did a personal post, just an organic post.
Absolutely.
And then is that where your
actually, so this is actually really important. I had adopted LinkedIn as a discipline like 6 years before that.
Okay.
Where I would literally post something every morning.
Okay.
Right. And so
were you strategic in that, or is it just you have to have visibility so you're posting anything, or what did you have
anything?
Kind of a niche?
My whole goal is I want to be helpful and relevant. Right.
Okay.
And so within kind of the marketing, sales, go-to-market space, maybe a few other areas like leadership and things like that, sustainability, I tend to post. And I think my content is usually pretty good. And so I built up a following on LinkedIn that then when I really needed that following, when I needed that relatively large group of people to see our announcement, they were there. But if you've got 228 followers on LinkedIn and you try and announce a startup, that's not going to get you much.
Right. And so is that where your first leads came from? Like your personal post?
I think there was maybe one actually that happened that way. Most of them were not marketing driven leads. They were me reaching out to people I knew saying, hey, let me tell you what's going on. Let me tell you what we've built and what we've got. And then doing a series of demos and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Also, we were never willing to, kind of like do a cheap deal, but we also didn't hose them down either, because what we really wanted more than anything in the early stage, other than customer validation, was customer input. We wanted customer feedback. We wanted customers, and actually the super valuable customer feedback is always negative. It's always when the customer says, man, you know what? I see what you're trying to do there in that product, but that's not really working for us. And we have this, we've written up like a couple pages, a couple slides detailing the problem, and all this that's solid gold, right? Worth so much more than the revenue, right? It's just impossible to place a value on that. So, it's kind of like, it took me a while, actually, unfortunately, to get the right attitude about my own individual 360-degree performance reviews, in large corporations, because my whole goal was to be the best, right? And so if anyone says that I could improve in some area, right, that was maybe not what I wanted to hear. And then I kind of wrapped my head around it correctly, right? And said, wow, thanks so much, because guess what? Most of the time, you're completely unaware of the fact that you're screwing up in some area, right? Because you just have a blind spot. And so the people that reveal those blind spots, whether it's to you personally or about your product or whatever, right? And they're, it may not be fun. It's never fun to get that kind of information, but man, I'm so grateful to them.
Yeah, because it's probably a lot cheaper than doing like formal user testing and observation and all that, especially with a software product. If you can get some free customer feedback from somebody who tried your service.
Yeah, and I would never call it free, because again, it's pretty brutal. Right?
Yeah.
and it's also, in fairness, it is brutal to them, right? Because they're investing a lot of time and effort to get value out of this tool as well. You cannot act like that's not true. It is extremely true. And so there is a certain altruism and in a company's willingness, a team's willingness to do this for you, that is truly remarkable, right? Because you could totally, given everything on their plate and all that kind of stuff, you would totally understand if they just kicked your ass out the door and said, come back, in several years when you've actually figured it out, right? You could totally get that. That's a not an unreasonable response.
Could you take us through the first few months of that launch and how the way you targeted customers changed? Because you went from 0 to 2 million in 18 months.
Mm-hmm.
And so was it like, what was that kind of pace of getting new customers, onboarding new customers? Was it a lot all at once, or was it gradual and then spike? Can you speak to that some?
Yeah, no, I mean, so that's a great question, because I'll tell you this, it never happens gradually, right? And the analytics actually bear this out as well.
Really?
The nonlinearity. So life in general, business in general, is very nonlinear. We prefer to try and think of it as being linear because it's easier for us to think about, but it's actually not even remotely linear. And so what happens is you get a lot of this, and then this, and then this, and then this, and you know, and so I mean there's some really strong kind of like whipsaw effects. You can feel like everybody in the world wants to talk to you, and then all of a sudden no one wants to talk to you. And what I learned, the way that I learned to think about this, is that when I thought about that, either way, good or bad, right? I was making it about me or about proof. Like somehow the definition of our success was that every, person that we cared about out there in the marketplace would suddenly turn around and want to talk to us and never do anything else but talk to us, right? And when you put it that way, it sounds so ridiculous that you go, well, of course that's not true, right? But when you're sitting there, and there's kind of, the way I would put it is, in that first year, there were lulls. And you're kind of like, hey, we can't have any lulls, chop, chop, right? And
Yeah.
And the marketplace doesn't care how you feel about it. In fact, they're not even thinking about how you think about it. And they're not intentionally giving you the brush off. They just got other stuff going on. So, it's pretty, I'll give you a similar example real fast, going back to brand. Where brand is like the grease on the gears of business. And it takes a while for that to actually, for you to get the engine completely lubed and going the way it should be. And for everyone else out there to feel that way, because it's actually not, the definition of brand is not what you think of your brand. It's what everybody else thinks of you, right? What they're saying about you. Do they think about you more now than they used to? Whatever, right? So you're kind of sitting there going, man, phone's not ringing, right? So you do more outbound, and some of that is successful, and but you're at some level, you're always aware that a sign of momentum is how many inbounds, unsolicited inbounds, you're getting, right? And so you're kind of going, crap, I didn't get any calls today. And it's a real testimony to how insecure it is to be in that place as an entrepreneur, because you really are looking at it exactly that way. I mean, day by day, right? You're not even looking at it in week blocks, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's just I would say that all of a sudden, brand is actually one of the most time lagged investments that you can make in your business, but it's crucial. But the main reason why most business leaders don't like to spend money on brand, right, is that they can't ever tell when it's paying off because it's so time lagged.
Probably won't be in the quarterly report.
Yeah, it won't be. In a lot of B2B, the impacts of brand are like anywhere from 4 to 6 quarters later, right? So it's one of those things that if you're not using an analytics tool like Proof, you'll never find it. You'll never understand it, right? And so it just will look like wasted money, stupid money, right? Why did we spend that money? And then when it does start to have a positive effect, you will think it's something else that delivered that positive effect, not your brand investment a year earlier, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of one of those things, right, where I think one of the hardest things, and the best analogy that I've ever heard in terms of talking about this, one of the hardest things is to navigate your way forward as an entrepreneur. Because the compass will always show you true north, but it doesn't tell you anything about all the obstacles and everything that you're going to have to get around and cross and, all this kind of stuff, right? And so what you really need is a GPS, right? You need the map function of the GPS, but more importantly, in some respects, you need the GPS that's going to say, hey, the route you're on was a really good route, that route to value. It was moving along really well. But now the marketplace has changed. The macroeconomic picture has changed. Lots of other things have changed, whatever, right? And this is no longer the best route for you to get to your goal, right? And you can see this between the forecast in a tool like Proof and the actuals. You can see the delta opening up, and you can see what's causing the delta. And so you can war game the response. You can, just like in your GPS on your phone, right? The phone's going to say, hey, man, you need to reroute. Right. And
yeah.
it's actually not just an analogy. It's literally the truth. It's a true comparison, because when you're using your GPS and you say, okay, I'm here, or it knows where you are, right? And you say, I want to go to this restaurant, and it gives you the proverbial 3 routes, the choice of 3 routes. Those are forecasts. Literally, those are forecasts. So, and then when you pick one, right, it's tracking you. It's tracking all these things that are either going to speed you up or slow you down. And then it's going to make a call of whether or not you need to change course or not. That's exactly what business leaders need, because if they try to do it without that kind of perspective, it's just too freaking hard. Like you go back to I've talked to some older entrepreneurs in tech, that did a tech startup, software startup 25, 30 years ago, right? I mean, it's really clear they succeeded based upon the fact that they had a great product and it happened to be in demand. That problem was so hairy that when they launched that product, everybody wanted it. Right. And it was also a smaller industry, and, it was all this kind of stuff. Right. So it was, that's the way it went down. Today, that wouldn't work. I mean, and they'll be the first one to tell you that a lot of those startups, failed disproportionately. Right.
Right.
For that reason.
What would you say the biggest challenge was during that 1.5 year, 18-month period, as you were getting those customers and ramping up to 2 million? What was the hardest part of customer acquisition during that time?
I would say that the hardest part, right, was even people that I knew, even people that knew Kyle or other people on the team, and who had, kind of like unquestioned regard for what we had accomplished. Their gut reaction is always to shave their risk. And the easiest way to shave their risk is to ask for discounts that no established company would ever accept.
Yeah.
And so you're on the horns of this dilemma as the entrepreneur, right? Because you really need the revenue, right?
Right.
You need the revenue, you need the validation, you need the momentum, all that stuff, right? And what are you willing to pay for that is really the question. And sometimes that can really be really hard. What I have learned, I guess, over time is that the one factor that cannot be at all entertained in that decision process by me or the people on the team is ego. As soon as you say, screw you, our product is awesome, we're not selling it for that, blah, 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 blah. Okay, you've just gone down the wrong road, right? It may be the best decision might indeed be to turn it down, but not for that reason. And so, when you feel, and you can't, most of us can't really control that too much. So you will feel it rise up inside you, that kind of indignation, that kind of like, how dare you ask for that, da, 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 da.
Yeah.
And as soon as you feel that, you need to really stop and kind of get rid of that. Or sometimes I would just, because as a founder in particular, you have a lot of psychic energy bound up in the company. So you are particularly vulnerable to that kind of thing, particularly if you were also a type A. One of the reasons why you might have done this in the first place was just to demonstrate just how smart you really are to people, which honestly, I can tell you people don't care. Right?
Yep.
So I would just say, a lot of times I would just turn it over to somebody else on the team and say, you make the call. I am not able, and I'm sorry that I'm not able to. I know it's bad. I'm going to work on this, right? But I'm not able to make an objective decision right now because everything in me is telling me to go, shoot them, flip them off, right? And that's not the basis of a good business decision.
For sure. This has been really interesting. Focusing on the importance of the founder's personal brand, awareness, confidence, and trust. Are there any books you'd recommend entrepreneurs starting out? Maybe they don't have a 20-year history yet, but they've decided to take that leap anyway and try to start something on their own. Or maybe there's some experienced kind of veteran corporate exec folks who are thinking about starting out and getting
there's
into
a book, and I know the title. I'm so sorry, I don't know the author off the top of my head.
That's okay.
But
I'll
I'll
add it to
send
the
it.
show
I'll
notes.
send it to you afterwards, and you can publish it with the when you publish the podcast. But it is. I'm pretty sure it is how things actually get done. Right, and it's a brilliant book about how organizations either functionally or dysfunctionally get things done. And I found it to be a remarkable decoder ring. Even as somebody who had spent a lot of time inside of organizations like that and felt like, honestly, that I had a pretty good grasp of how things really got done, I learned a lot from that book.
Okay.
Because the most important thing, okay, is you've got to really understand your customers' problems.
Yeah.
How they have to operate, how they define success and failure. You got to that's going to be really, really key, right? That's far more important in some respects. I mean, this is not meant to be an either or thing, right? But it's far more important than being an expert on your product.
That's good. Let's close out with you speaking directly to that. Let's say we got 1,000 of your target ideal customers listening. What's that kind of summary of what Proof Analytics can do to help entrepreneurs or CEOs or the CMOs maybe?
So we are Proof is a business GPS. We are a go-to-market GPS if you want to think of it in a particular use case, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what we did is we took classic, totally proven, totally transparent, no black box math around multivariable regression, and which is pretty much the foundation of all science.
Okay.
And it's been around, forever, right? I mean, like literally a very long time. So the problem in business is not the math or even the data, although both are important, right? It's what business leaders struggle with when it comes to data scientists and analytics in general is they really don't speak the same language. More to the point, they don't have the same priorities. So data science is all about, I want the most accurate result, the most accurate answer, and they've established 95% confidence score as kind of like a minimum, right? The problem is it's totally unrealistic because as soon as you talk about a lot of human behavior data, which is pretty much all business, that's what business is, right? The maximum is usually in the 50s if you're lucky.
Wow.
Right. And so data science tends to exclude that. The real thing that the business wants is they don't see the world deterministically, meaning they're not looking for an absolute answer, right? What they want is, I want to just be able to make a better decision tomorrow than I made today. Right? Because let's say it's a decision that somebody has to make every day, 365 days a year. And if they can make it half a point better every day, which is not a lot, right? You look at that through the window of compounded effect, right? Annualized, that's really close to 2,000% improvement year on year. That's huge. Wow. That's monstrous, right?
Yeah.
And that's the way a business leader thinks about this, right? And they also know that when they make a business decision, that if it were to be modeled by a bunch of data scientists, it would be the confidence score would be excruciatingly low, probably in the 20s, right? So if you can get them from 20 to 30 or even 40, you're a hero, particularly if you are doing it where the model is recalculating constantly at the speed of the business. So the risk that is normally there with, you compute the model and you wait 6 months and you recompute the model again. And so you're kind of like, the blind man for 6 months. Right. That's not there anymore. And so what we did was taking the GPS as a metaphor, but also as a real life example of what we do, right? We automated it all, or most of it, right? Where it is a business GPS. It will, you can ask it a question and create a model and attach all the data that you need to feed that model. And it will just keep on recomputing it. Whenever new data is brought into the model, there's usually a cadence at which businesses measure something, right? That's related largely to their operational cadence. And so it's by definition updated in real time for them, or relevant time for them.
What kind of data might a business input into ProofAnalytics?
It really totally depends on what the question is, right? So like if you're, a classic question for a lot of our customers is, hey, all these things that we're spending money on in marketing, what's the real impact of all that stuff on sales productivity? So this would be kind of like, how many more deals are we getting because marketing is involved? How many more big deals are we getting? What's the accelerating function of marketing on deal velocity, right? Because, more deals, bigger deals, faster deals, there's a one-to-one relationship between those three things and revenue margin and cash flow.
Right.
Right. So if you can say, okay, our goals are more and better revenue margin and cash flow, and we understand that more deals, bigger deals, faster deals is inextricably, bound up with that outcome, then how is marketing helping to improve sales productivity in these areas? So like if marketing totally didn't exist and the whole burden was being carried by sales, would they be able to close the same number of deals, same size deals as fast as we're currently experiencing? And if we spent more money on marketing, is that going to help accelerate deal velocity, or help get more in large deals, more deal expansion? And how long is it going to take for that marketing investment to have that kind of impact? Right. So it's kind of like value, time to value on a calculated, forecasted basis, which the forecasted piece is the whole ball of wax from a credibility standpoint, right? Because if you call the ball and then it happens the way you called it,
right,
or you can show, hey, things started to change, and so I had to change with it, right? And so we're still going to get there, but we're going to get there, a month later than we thought, right? And here's why, and it's an explainable, logical, mathematically proven out argument, and everyone's going to go, totally cool, totally get it, right?
So is this, or maybe you can compare it to like typical marketing tracking and analytics that you get from any platform you might run ads on. You'll get whatever number of conversions, and then it might project if you increase your budget by X, you'll get X more conversions.
Yep.
It'll give you a little bit of forecasting and all the different.
So actually, that's not a forecast, even though most people will say, well, it is kind of a forecast. Well, it's actually not. It's an extrapolation.
Okay.
Right. And an extrapolation is basically says the premise of an extrapolation is that past is always prologue. Meaning the whole, whatever is going on is going to continue to go on just the way it's always gone on, right? I mean, does anybody who's lived through the last 3 or 4 years believe that anymore?
Right.
I mean, I just think
it doesn't account for black swan events or
seasonality or anything, right? It doesn't, if all of a sudden the macroeconomics change, or you have some sort of reputational problem in the marketplace, or your competitors do something that's, that impacts you, right? The extrapolation is totally blind to all those factors, all those externalities, right? It's like saying, if you're a surfer, okay, so the stuff you don't control is the wave, and and you're never going to control the wave. So what do you control? Well, you control your response to the wave. Right? And so you build in little feedback loops that try and help you stay upright as opposed to wiping out, right? Then let's just say that you've ridden 5 waves today and you haven't wiped out once. The extrapolation would be that you could probably go another 1 or 2, right, and have the same experience. But does anybody really believe that? Right? I mean, that's not the way it works, right? The ocean has a mind of its own, right? It can, I almost died in a sailing accident when I was 18. So in the middle of a storm in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico, I totally get this personally, right? So I will just tell you that extrapolation is bullshit, right? And if your sales leader or your marketing leader or any tool is giving you an extrapolation, it's lying to you. It's again, we were talking about linearity and nonlinearity and how most people love linearity because it's easier to grasp and understand,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's what extrapolation is. Extrapolation is linearity. But it's not
Okay.
true, right? And so we can give you, our software can give you an actual real deal multivariable forecast, right? That takes into account nonlinearity, which is nonlinearity is like the easy way of talking about nonlinearity is that it is somewhat unpredictable. It's not a straight line. It's
Mm-hmm.
this, right? It's all this kind of stuff.
Right.
It's also
So,
where leverage comes from, right? So whether you're talking about engineering or whether you're talking about finances or whatever, right? When you're talking about leverage, you're talking about non-linearity because linearity gives you no leverage. So like a great example of this in go-to-market would be sales function is linear. So let's say that the CRO gets a new revenue goal. The first thing that he or she is going to do is figure out what does that mean in terms of the pro rata quota for all of my sales guys. And usually they're going to conclude that they don't have enough sales guys. So now they have to go hire a bunch of sales guys rapidly to then try and meet their quota, knowing that some of them are going to suck and not perform at all, right? And it's it's kind of this. It's a very linear function. Marketing actually was created 120 years ago from the get-go as to create nonlinear leverage on sales. It was a way where you didn't necessarily have to spend more money in order to reach more people. I mean, that's not a perfect statement. I mean, there is some relationship between what you spend and what you get, but I
for
mean,
sure.
it's you're not the sales guy in the street going door to door to door, spending 8 or 10 hours a day talking to people and being successful with some, right? That's necessary. But what you really
Mm-hmm.
want is you want the leverage from marketing that
Right.
is going to help you get more good stuff out of your sales force.
Right.
So that's the
So,
difference, right?
okay, I understand that part, linear versus nonlinear, but how does Proof Analytics achieve that? Like, how do you make your tool aware of all the kind of
So what happens
environmental factors?
is that the customer says, "Okay, here are the questions I have. This is what I want to know. These are the decisions I have to make that I want to make better." And creating the model for those is reasonably straightforward. Um, the
How
key
long does that take to create a model?
less than a day in
Okay.
proof. No, I mean normally under normal data science kinds of manual model creation, it would take days.
And does the data have to already be like all the inputs have to already be connected for the
So one of
system
the
to
things that people
start
really
that
love
process?
about proof on that score is that we have two different kinds of ways to introduce data into a model. You can do what's called a flat file upload, which is essentially uploading an Excel file right into the tool.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and there's a time and a place to do that, right? Particularly when you are kind of testing out the model before you put it into production, right? This is a really good way to do that. Kind of keep it real lean and non-complicated. Um, but I mean, the real virtue where proof really sings, right, is when you finally say, okay, this is the model, these are the data sets, we have all the data sets, and we can API those, we can connect them automatically into proof and feed the model and get automatic recalculation of that model at whatever cadence we need, right? That's the value. That's where
Mm-hmm.
you really, it comes into play. And so, and if you don't know anything about regression, in a nutshell, regression takes data from the past And data is always about the past. It's only about the past. And so data by itself is really valuable, but it cannot forecast. This is why extrapolations off of data sets is a non-starter, right? So you're going to go, okay, I'm going to take all this data and I'm going to put it into this model, and it's going to find the relationships, the cause and effect relationships that are the most important. And it's going to say, okay, so the way you're going to get the readout, okay, so let's cut to the chase on that, right? The readout is, okay, here are all the things that contributed to this outcome. Here's the stack rank of how that operated. What was the most important, second most important, all this kind of stuff, and what didn't have any effect at all. And the stuff that you didn't have any effect at all, but you're spending a lot of money on, you need to take a really hard look at that and maybe say, let's not spend any more money on that and let's put that money somewhere else. So this is a direct reflection of opportunity cost, helps people mitigate waste and remove that opportunity cost issue as much as possible. It will tell you the time lag. So this is how long it's going to take for this investment or any other investment to have the desired effect. Most of the time, you don't have a lot of control over that, because the time lag is actually more about how the marketplace reacts and processes to things than anything that you can do about it. So in the end, this is really it's exactly like managing an investment portfolio. If you have a 401k or something like that, your wealth manager is going to manage that stuff in the same way that go-to-market investments, marketing and sales investments and other kinds, right, should be managed.
Right. Because you've only got so much time, energy, cash.
Yeah. And you also want to balance your risk, right?
It's like asset management. Yeah.
And it's not just about, investing in a number of things, right? So that you diffuse your risk in that dimension. You also want to have investments that pay off at different time horizons. Same deal, right?
Yeah. And the website for Proof Analytics, is it ProofAnalytics.ai?
It is.
The right website? Okay, I was just going to share my screen here so everybody can get a little view of what we're talking about here.
And
this has been really interesting.
There's always a lot of people, right, who always say, well, how do I know the math is good, right? Well,
right.
The answer to that is that it's not new math. The secret sauce of proof is not some sort of black box approach to math that, where you're saying, hey, we have this super duper, super secret algorithm that's going to tell you everything you always wondered about, right? That's completely BS, right? And any vendor who takes that approach with you, okay, is I would really question that, like, big time. So our secret sauce is in the way we automated it, the way that we make it accessible to people, the way we price it, the way, all that kind of stuff. We are all about making this available. If you really want to use it, you can use it, right? You can afford to use it. You can be taught easily how to use it. That's the whole goal, right? Because everyone involved in proof, including especially me, right, made a lot of money that we would not have otherwise made in our careers because of analytics. Like I structured my entire comp package in my last two corporate jobs based on analytics like this, right? And it allowed me to personally capture a lot more comp than I would have ever gotten under a normal contract, right? So I want that for everybody. That's an incredible thing, right? It's value extraction, right? You're creating a lot of value. You deserve to be paid for that value.
So who's the target customer for you guys? that ideal role at a company or type of person who would use your service?
Well, I mean, we do a lot in go to market, so marketing and sales and things like that, right?
Okay.
So I would say the CMO and the CRO for sure, but we also we take a lot of inbounds today from finance, and it's, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out why, right? I mean, finance is
Right.
trying to optimize big time so that waste is largely removed because money is tight, right? And so
Yeah.
that's why that's going on. And so it's yeah, I mean, I would say but I mean, it's an agnostic platform. So what that means is
Okay.
that you can really use it to compute anything, right? In fact, when we do big product updates, the really big ones, the way we test that everything happened the way it was supposed to happen and all that kind of stuff was we run healthcare data through it with a known
Oh,
outcome.
wow.
This is a scenario that obviously happened in the past, but it has full scale analytics and everyone knows what the answer is. And so
Oh,
the
okay.
goal is that, you want to see your tool give the right answer, right? And if it
Right.
doesn't, then you've got an issue somewhere. And so that's how we do it. So you can use it on a business wide basis. You really can.
Really cool. Well, Mark, thank you so much for being here today. You provided a lot of value and gave, I think, a different perspective on getting first customers than really we've talked about before on past episodes. So that's cool that it fills a gap, especially around that idea of the founder brand and focusing on that. Um, I'll include links to everything we've talked about in the show notes. And yeah, just want to say thanks for giving us time today.
You bet. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope it was helpful. If any of your listeners want to contact me, the best way to do it by far is a private message on LinkedIn.
Okay.
I mean, if you want to do it publicly underneath one of my posts, that's fine too, but you don't have to. And,
Yeah.
Email is typically not the best way to reach me. And, I'm also on Twitter. The handle is at Mark Stouse. And so you can also do it that way. But I'm very responsive. I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn in particular, so the response time is probably measured in minutes.
Cool. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. Reach out to Mark if you're in that target demo, and we'll see you next episode.
Thanks so much, man.
Bye.